Okay, we're back. We're back talking about Why Islam. 877 Why Islam. Found on the web at whyislam.org. And as I mentioned last time, Why Islam is the proselytizing arm of the Islamic Circle of North America, the ICNA, known to be an affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood organization in North America. These guys have their tables at county fairs and county festivals and state fairs, and perhaps you've even seen them at a mall or two. Some friends of mine not too long ago were walking through one of the local shopping malls here and happened to stumble upon this Why Islam table, and they collected a bunch of tracts like this one we're going to talk about tonight. So they're everywhere trying to spread Islam. They'll have information out there, tracts, they'll have Qurans free for the taking. And they say they're not for proselytism, but simply as an informational arm to dispel the misconceptions of Islam and provide an education about Islam to unaware Americans. Yet proselytism, as we saw in the last video, is their chief aim. That's the chief cornerstone verse on their website upon which the group is founded. So let's move on. I want to begin talking about their tracts, their information that they lay out there at their tables. And this is the first tract I want to focus on. It's called Islam Explained. And I want to focus on this tract because this is probably basically the foundational tract for every other tract that we're going to be looking at. You have to understand what Islam is before you can understand the different concepts of Islam that are talked about or addressed in the rest of the tracts. The first thing one notices when one opens up the tract on the inside fold, open it up from the inside, is that they have a definition of what the word Islam means. And it says the Arabic word Islam means voluntary surrender to the will of Allah. Well, that's true. The word Islam actually means to submit to the will of Allah. But yet if you go to the whyislam.org website, you'll see something entirely different. On the website, they say that the word Islam actually means peace. And how many of us have heard that? How many of us have not heard that? That Islam means peace. And therefore Islam must be a peaceful religion, right? Because it derives from the word peace. Well, not so quickly. In order to understand the meaning of a word in Arabic, you have to go back to the infinitive root on which that word is based. The infinitive root word of an Arabic word can have up to 30 different meanings depending on the different vowels and consonants that are attached to it and the way it's organized in the Arabic language. The infinitive root for Islam is the word salama. Salama. Salam, which is the Arabic word for peace, also derives from salama. And that's why Muslims say that Islam means peace, because it shares the same infinitive root. But there are many other words that can be derived from the same infinitive root, salama. For example, one of the derivations of salama means the stinging of a snake or the tanning of leather. So is it fair to say that Islam also means the stinging of a snake or tanning of leather rather than peace? How could one not say that if they want to make the argument that Islam means peace, simply because it shares the same root? Two other words that share the same root were words that Muhammad closed his letters with as he was inviting nearby political leaders to join Islam. Before Muhammad would attack a group or a tribe, he would first send his messengers ahead. Sometimes he would send a letter ahead. And he would address the political leader of that tribe or clan and close his letters out with the words, Aslim Taslam. Aslim Taslam, both of those words derive from the same infinitive root salama. But neither of them means peace. What Aslim Taslam means is essentially surrender and you'll be safe. Or if you don't surrender, be prepared to fight in battle. Now what kind of a religion can claim to be peaceful? And why do Muslims get away with claiming that the word Islam means peace if the same infinitive word can be used to mean surrender or be prepared to fight? Interesting, huh? Let's move on. Let's move on from that. We've covered enough ground on that. Another interesting little tidbit of information we find in this tract. Again, on the inside fold, it says, the revealed books from Allah are the Torah, the Psalms, the Gospel, and the Quran. The Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad as the final book of guidance. Among all these books, it, speaking of the Quran, is the only book that remained unchanged in its original revealed form. And they go on to basically expound on that a little bit on the inside portion of the track. Under this section of the Quran, it says, every word of the Quran is the word of Allah. Unlike other scriptures that were corrupted with human interpolations and omissions, the Quran has remained unchanged even to a letter for over 1,400 years. Well, that is just simply wrong. And sadly, most Muslims don't even know the history behind their own scripture, behind their own text. But there is no way that any scholar who is familiar with Islam and familiar with the foundations of the Quran, there's no way that anybody can make that claim that the Quran has survived unchanged. Just as a quick example, a very quick history through the tour of the Quran, when Muhammad began receiving his revelations, his close companions around him would try to memorize what they heard Muhammad utter. If they couldn't memorize it, they would scramble for something to write it down on, sticks or stones or parchment or animal skin, whatever happened to be nearby that they could scribble some inscriptions on. And it's these foundations which form the Quran today. Now, remember, Muhammad's companions each tried to memorize what they heard Muhammad say. And Muhammad had a number of companions. And so each companion compiled his or her own collection of what would be called the Quran. It is now known that at the death of Muhammad, there existed no fewer than 15 different codices, manuscripts, 15 different manuscripts, different from one another, because 15 of Muhammad's companions had each compiled their own version of what they heard Muhammad say. These manuscripts differed from one another in significant ways. For example, the manuscript of Ibn Masud only contains 111 chapters. It did not contain 114 chapters of today's Quran. The manuscript compiled by another one of Muhammad's companions, a gentleman by the name of Ubay ibn Ka'b, didn't have the 114 chapters of today also. He had 116 chapters in his version of the Quran. The Quran of Abu Musa, his compilation, also had 116 chapters. And so because there were competing versions of the Quran in existence at the time of Muhammad that found their way into the different metropolitan areas, one of the successors of Muhammad, the third caliph, Caliph Uthman, had a bit of a quandary. Because as these different competing Qurans had found their way into the different metropolitan areas, and the Qurans differed from one another, there was essentially a civil war going on between the different metropolitan areas as to who possessed the proper Quran. Why? Because the Qurans differed from one another. One group would say, no, we have the right Quran, you guys are wrong. And they would say, no, we have the right Quran, you guys are wrong. Another group would say, no, we got the right Quran, you both are wrong. And they were fighting amongst one another. So the way Uthman settled this is he took the Quran of one of Muhammad's secretaries, a gentleman by the name of Zayd ibn Thabit, who was commissioned by Muhammad's first successor, Caliph Abu Bakr, to collect the Quran. He collected the Quran, gave it to one of Muhammad's widows by the name of Hafsa. And at the time of Uthman, around 652, Uthman resurrected that copy of the Quran from Hafsa, ordered his scribes to make multiple copies of it, distributed it to the different metropolitan areas, and said, if your Quran differs from this one, which I'm going to standardize on, this will be the official standard version. If yours differs, burn it. So the competing Qurans that differed from one another significantly were ordered to be destroyed by Caliph Uthman. Now remember, the argument in this tract is that the Quran has remained untouched, untattered, untouched by mankind since its inception, even down to the very letter. Let me give you another example. There was an example one time when in Muhammad's biography, earliest biography of Muhammad called The Life of Muhammad, written by Ibn Ishaq, about 150 years after Muhammad's death. A couple was brought to Muhammad caught in the act of adultery. It says right here on page 266, a married man had committed adultery with a married woman, and they sent them to Muhammad and asked him what the law about them is concerning the penalty. And Muhammad, the apostle, went out to them, commanded that the two should be stoned, and they were stoned at the door of his mosque. So Muhammad inquired of God what was the command for adultery. And it was revealed in the Quran that the penalty for adultery was stoning. Problem is, that stoning verse is missing from the Quran today. Where did it go? If the Quran has been preserved perfectly, as this tract seems to suggest, then where did the verse of stoning go? In fact, this was an issue for one of Muhammad's later followers. I'm quoting from the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, the most renowned hadith collection for Sunni Muslims, 85% of the world's Muslims. This is the official version from Dar Salam Publications, the Saudi publishing arm in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Just so that you guys know, I'm quoting from an authentic Islamic source. In the book of Al-Hudud, I'm in volume 8, book number 86, the book of Al-Hudud. Hadith number 6829 says, narrated Ibn Abbas, Umar said, I am afraid that after a long time has passed, people may say, we do not find the verse of Rajam, or stoning to death, in Allah's book, the Quran, and consequently they may go astray by leaving an obligation that Allah has revealed. So Ibn Abbas even recognized that somewhere along the way, the verse of stoning from the Quran had been removed. How can the verse of stoning have been removed if, as this tract says, the Quran's never been tampered with, never been changed by mankind? So you see, there are many historical problems, even from their own sources, from Islam's own sources, that suggest the Quran has been tampered with. Another problem, marriage and family life. This tract says, no discrimination is made on the basis of sex between man and woman. No discrimination is made on the basis of sex. Well, we're going to cover that in another tract dealing with women's issues in Islam. But let me just give you some of the areas where discrimination is rampant. For example, the testimony of a woman is only worth half that of a man, according to Islam, according to Sharia law. It requires 2 women to equal the testimony of 1 man. Inheritance. Women only get half the inheritance of a man. If a father has a daughter and a son, upon his death, the son will get twice as much of an inheritance as the daughter will. Equality? I think not. A man can have up to 4 wives, but a woman can only have 1 husband. A man can divorce his wife basically without reason, but a woman cannot divorce her husband the same. She basically has to go to court and file an excruciating lawsuit and make a proof in court, make a claim in court that she is worthy to be granted a divorce. No discrimination on the basis of sex? No. But this is the kind of misinformation that is being spouted to the general public, and you need to be aware of it so that when you see it, you can shout it down, you can confront it, and expose it for the lie that it is. We're going to be getting into more of these tracts as time goes on. But if you want more information about this and other issues, you can go to my website, www.radicaltruth.net. I've got a ton of articles on there on Islam, on the Quran, on Muhammad. I've got free downloads for you to take advantage of so you can become educated and begin confronting Muslims with the truth and exposing the lies that they are perpetrating upon the general public, upon you and me, upon our friends, upon our neighbors, upon our co-workers. Get educated and get busy.